Hey there, viewers, and welcome back to the Self-Made Auto Channel. We're going to have a 2001 Chevrolet. It's a 1500. It's got the big 5.3. It's pretty mint. Came from Arizona. I'm super excited. The mode door does not function anymore. The guy says it's on kind of somewhere between defrost and floor. He did say it does change from hot to cold, but it just doesn't change modes. Defrost, floor, panel. So let's check it out. Lights off. 210,420 miles. Good even number. Let's have a look. Let's just verify the complaint. I did print us out a theory in operation how this little guy works, because you can't go to war unless you know what you're fighting. So let's first of all verify. So right now it is on the defrost. I'm not hearing anything happen. Let's verify it is on defrost. Yes, it is blowing out of the defrost. Not well, but it is blowing out. Floor panel. Now these are electric, so you don't have to worry about having the car running or anything. So I'm not hearing any change. Put it on recirc. Interesting, I don't hear any change from the recirc either. That's kind of interesting. Duly noted. Then we will just take, I did print us a wiring diagram too, because I assume we're going to have to test this actuator assembly. Anyhow, let's go here. Mode door actuator. And they write, the mode door actuator is a 5-wire bidirectional electric motor that incorporates a feedback potentiometer. Okay, so just from that sentence alone, we're assuming probably 2 wires to a motor, 3 wires to a potentiometer. So 5-volt reference and a ground, or 5 volts a signal and a ground. So it's, you know, like a throttle position sensor, think of. So it says it has ignition 3 voltage, a low reference, a control, a 5-volt reference, and a position signal circuit enabled the actuator to operate. Okay, so that's pretty much what we thought. We got voltage, a ground, a control wire, a 5-volt reference, and a position signal circuit. We'll draw it out. We'll look at it. Control circuit. So this is how it's going to move the motor. 'Cause that's what I wondered. You know, does it just reverse polarity back and forth on the motor? But it says here, the control circuit either uses a 0, 2.5, or a 5-volt signal to command the actuator movement. When the actuator is at rest, the control circuit value is 2.5 volts. A 0 or a 5-volt control signal commands the actuator movement in opposite directions. When the actuator shaft rotates, the potentiometer's adjustable contact changes the door position signal between 0 and 5 volts. And then basically the HVAC unit will look at that. So let's say we have, let me look at the diagram here. We do have power going to it, to the motor. And then the control wire is this gray wire, and that is what it sends the 0, the 2.5, or the 5 volts. So 0 is going to make it one way, 2.5 volts will make it go to rest, 5 volts will make it go the other way. So it must have some kind of logic inside the HVAC, or inside that mode door actuator, so that's good to know. The HVAC control module uses a range 0 to 255 counts to index actuator position. The door position signal voltage is converted to a 0 to 255 count range. So our potentiometer is going to read from 0 to 5 volts depending on where it's at on the sweeper. More than likely from like a 0.5 to 4.5 would be my assumption. Once this HVAC controller sees that feedback, it converts it into this count range, it's 0 to 255 counts. As the actuator shaft rotates, the changing position signal is sent to the module. Once the position signal and the command value are the same, the module changes the control signal to 2.5. Because remember, when it goes to 2.5 volts, it says, whoa, you're there, dude, slow down. Interesting. So, armed with what we know, we can look at the diagram. We can see that it's exactly what we read. We got a 3-wire potentiometer, 2-wire motor, 1 full-time power, and the control and the ground. What's interesting is I don't hear the HVAC or the recirculation door goes shut. So I think first thing first, we should just check the fuse. But however, it is the same fuse that runs this controller. So if that fuse was blown, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have what we need here. Yes, that is the HVAC fuse. The blower motor fuse is separate, so no sense in checking the fuse because this thing lights up and this thing works. So we know the fuse is good. So I say we go right to the actuator. We'll get our little U-scope, see if it's receiving the correct signals. And being the fact that he did say it does go from hot to cold, runs off the same power source, so that would lead me to believe that the fuse itself is good. Yeah, probably should have looked under the dash before I started this video, because it's a mother lover to get to. Well, not really, but with a camera, so give you an idea where we're at. There's the throttle. You bring her all the way up till you see where the throttle cable goes through. And there she is. She sits up in there. I see it is made in the PRC, which is short for the People's Republic of China. Now, I did unplug it so we can test it. I was hoping the wires would pull down, but that is where I'm going to be doing all of my terminations. First, we're going to do power and ground, make sure we have a good power, good ground, load the circuit, and then we'll check the other circuits real quick. According to our diagram, so we're looking at left side HVAC module, mode actuator, black wire is the ground, the brown wire is our fused power that comes from up here, the HVAC 1 fuse, and that is only hot in the run position. So, I've got a 4 amp bulb in there. If we turn the key on, that should burn bright. There she is. So we have good power, good ground. That's 2 out of 5. Next, we will check our 5-volt reference. So if we're looking at this, we have on the gray wire, that should be our 5-volt reference coming from the HVAC module. So right there, 5-volt ref. That goes into there. That's the gray wire. The red is going to be the feedback circuit. So that's going to be the one that says, you know, the position it's in, so it can calculate that 0 to 255 counts. And then of course the ground we know is good, so we'll go from we'll probe the ground, and then we will probe the 5-volt reference to make sure that it's good. So we've got our U-scope set up. We're 1 volt per division, 200 milliseconds. We are key on. We can see our average voltage is 5.1 something, but we got a good steady 5 volts. Should go away with the key off. All right. So the next wire I'm checking is the red wire here. So it's going to be the signal return, or the feedback circuit, to let it know where it's at. Now that one you have to do plugged in and back probed. And we know the ground's good, so we can just, you know, electric ground it somewhere else and then just back probe that. And key on here, we can see we're holding 5 volts on that wire too. And I know that the OEM data there said that it goes from 0 to 5 volts, but I highly doubt that. This usually indicates to me that it's open, that the circuit is no good. The only one I'm kind of questioning, we still have to check the white wire, the control wire, or the white wire that goes to the control. It's interesting that it goes to both the air temperature and the mode door. How can it control it? Oh no, it doesn't. I'm sorry, I was looking at the diagram wrong. Okay, so yeah, that comes up. Let's see, that is mode signal is what they call it, or it's actually going to be the control wire for that motor, providing that this diagram is correct, which it has been so far on everything else. Yeah, 5 volts been good, ground's been good, power wire was correct. So that's going to be the one that goes from 0 to 2.5 to 5. But I don't know is if it sees the signal wire as being open, if it's going to do anything on that wire whatsoever. That I don't know. So I'm probed into that control right now, and I'm switching modes, switching temperature, and it's just staying at 0. So that's kind of peculiar, which, like I say, with that feedback circuit open, I wouldn't be surprised. I have to make a decision. So the only thing I can think to do to either prove or disprove that the motor functions is we know how it works, 0, 2.5, and 5. We know it's, for whatever reason, sitting at 0 and doesn't command unless I had a poor connection. I'm going to take a jump wire. I just got a jump wire with a couple probes on it. I'm going to go in the control wire and then just touch it to the 5 volt wire, and technically if it's good it should move. So I'm going to try that. If it doesn't, then at that point we have to assume that that motor is junk. Well, I'll be dipped if that didn't work. So I pushed 5 volts into it and the sucker moved, and then it continued to go. And so just for the heck of it, I'm like, why is it stuck there? So right now I am on the signal wire. So we're looking at this potentiometer. We're back on this red wire right here, because that's the one we had that I told you that I thought was open at 5 volts. So now we're at the other extreme end, so we're at 0.3 volts. So you can see it up in the corner. And I'm going to move it down, because if it goes open, I got to assume it quits working, then it doesn't know, it can't move it back. So I'm going to start moving positions. We're going to let it go through a full sweep. Let me let that screen refresh. I'll go back the other way. Okay, so now we're going a full sweep, and this should make a steady, smooth change up to, I don't know, 4.5, I'm guessing. Where's it at right now? Nope, it goes open. It goes to 5 volts. Now let me try to move it back. And see, now it won't move. Now we're stuck at that 5 volts again, back in our original position. And nothing's happening. But if I go back under there on the control wire, so I go back under here on the white wire, I'm going to jump her 5 volts to that again to see if I can get it to move. I think once the HVAC control sees this 5 volt signal, it doesn't like it, and it never sees it make it to its predetermined counted position, so it just quits. I'm plugged into that control wire, and I've got the panel set on panel, or the HVAC set on panel, and this is the one that's supposed to command 5 to 0 to 2.5, 2.5 being its rest position once it achieves its position that it wants to. And interestingly enough, the actuator has quit moving, but it's still at 5 volts. It hasn't told it to stop moving. So let me just move it back a little bit. So it goes to 0 volts, gets to where it wants to be, and then goes to 2.5. Take it back to the other extreme. It goes to 5 and then just stays there. Maybe that's to keep it in the max position. So I'm going to pick a position halfway in the middle. So we'll pick floor. Bang, hits 2.5 volts, tells it where to stop. I'm going to go all the way to defrost. This is where it gets stuck. See, it momentarily went to 2.5, then back to 0. And now it's not commanding it back. So when I go back to panel, like I am right now, it never resends that 5 volt signal, which is interesting. I'm just wondering if just because it's losing its reference voltage coming out of that potentiometer, it must confuse it. I realize we've hit the stupid level of this, but I just got to know. So we're on panel. We're in the signal wire coming out of that potentiometer. I just want to see if we can see where it hits the open point. So I'm going to go about halfway. Let her steady. We're working our way to defrost. Yeah, for whatever reason, so the yellow line on that scope is 5 volts. Once it hits that yellow line, it's just done. Once that potentiometer hits 5 volts, it just quits sending the command. I don't know. Here's where I'm at, folks. I took and pulled the actuator out. The doors move. There's 2 doors under there. So one, there's like a gear mechanism, I have to show you, and then a lever, and they both, I can flunk them, if that's a word. Flunk, flunk. You hear them hit both ways. I'm not convinced the actuator's bad, just because it works when it's within its limits. And looking at the feedback signal on it, I'm not seeing, yes, it does go to 5 volts. On the low end of the spectrum, though, it's, 0.3. So I would expect this to go to, 4.5, 4.7. I doubt that it goes all the way to 5. So I kind of tested that theory. I stuck my finger, so when the gear is all the way up on, I think it's on panel. Yeah, when it's on panel, the gear goes all the way up, and so when I put on defrost and it comes all the way down, that's when we see it hit that 5 volt mark and then just quit working. So I stuck my thumb up there just enough so when that gear is rotating around, it hits my thumb and stops. And then from that point, I can continue to switch back and forth, back and forth. So that's at like 4.8 volts, something like that. And then if I remove my finger and allow it to, what I think is go past its stop point, that's when it screws up. But I don't know why it's going past its stop point. The only thing to stop it there is the lever mechanism off from the defrost door. So where the defrost door goes in this HVAC unit, there's a white lever that, you know, flunks, flunk, 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 flunk. This truck has a lot of miles on it. It's been around the block a time or two, and I can see where people have touched things under here. The heater box is exceptionally clean, is a part that concerns me. Now that actuator that's on there is OEM, that made in China TMI brand is the OEM. I'm just not convinced that that actuator is not functioning, nor am I convinced that the HVAC module is not working as it should, because once it's at the other extreme, at the 0.5 volt mark on panel, even though it doesn't switch the command voltage to 2.5, it's, you know, just stays at 5, it still, you know, brings it back every single time. So I'm not sure yet, I guess is the short answer. So pop that off. Let me see if I can get you guys where you can see. So that white actuator right there, that's the one that runs the door, the defrost door, and that's what commands it to stop, you know, once it torques against that. And then you have the white gear, which runs the other door, the panel door, I believe it is. So that one there with the peg on it, so the defrost door, now that runs in this groove right here. So when this actuator assembly turns and rotates, it hits this stop, and then it stops the motor from turning. I don't know, this is freaking bizarre. Just can't imagine this sucker's bad in reading out of range, but I could be wrong. I did verify that part number on that white, on the white lever there. It is the correct part number on it, so it's not like the arm's too short or somebody put something different on there. Welcome to my vlog. So here's where I'm at. Did a lot of poking in service data. I have questions, they don't have answers. It's just interesting that we can stop it within that acceptable range and it continues to work all the time, every time. So I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if once it gets to its maximum range, you know, either panel or defrost, we did note that it does not, you know, kick it back to that 2.5 volts to make it stop. And short of having another one to check, I don't know if that's the way that works. I just can't imagine it just constantly sending the command to that motor to just, you know, keep going. I think the best thing for me to do is to get a used HVAC module. We'll run down here to Wilbert's. You pull it. Not a sponsor. I'll do that tomorrow because it's almost quitting time. And we will get a used one just to put it in and see. It's only going to cost me a few bucks, and I can't learn any more from service data, so you got to do something, fella. And I think that's probably the best option. So we'll do that. See you guys in the morning. And just like that, we're here the next day. Went to Wilbert's. You pulled a bath, not a sponsor. Got the W on it. There's very many of these little guys down there. I found a couple of these old body style Chevrolets, GMCs. The one truck I went to look at did have a wad of duct tape over this in this position. So I got the one without the duct tape. What I'm wondering, or what my thoughts are here, is we got a couple unknowns. A, we don't know from service data at what point this quits trying to move the actuator if it sees that over voltage on the potentiometer. Which appears that's what ours is doing. And the other thing that kind of concerns me is the fact that it keeps trying. Like if I stick my finger in there and stop that, it keeps trying to push, which is weird. I can't imagine that this controller would just keep giving the beans to those motors at their full extreme. You know, from panel to defrost is the full movement of that actuator. So that kind of bothers me a little bit, that it just continues to try to push. But what's weird is, you know, if we go to floor, it goes sends that 2.5 volt signal and stops it. How come it doesn't stop it when we go to panel or when we go to defrost? So that's a little concerning, but like I say, service info is completely unhelpful in that regards. The other thing I'm thinking that potentially could be wrong here is all over the top of the dash there's little bits of foam. There's little bits of foam all over the floor, and it's a pretty distinct colored foam, and it's the foam from the inside on the blend doors. Mode door, blend door, whatever you want to call it. Boy, those things are brittle. Broke all 4 of them. So what my thought is with that is, what if all of the foam is missing off the doors? So when the door comes, let's say this is the door, my hand's a door, and it's covered with foam, and it comes to seal, but that foam is missing, and it allows it to overextend slightly, causing us to go over our 5 volt mark. That's my other thought of potentially what could be happening. And it'd be the only thing that makes sense if this doesn't fix it. I mean, it has to be the fact that it's missing too much foam from the doors. Let's just make sure this thing works. The buttons work. Click it in there. We're coming out the panel. Moment of truth. Switch it to floor. Switch to floor. I want to go back to panel. Going back to panel. I'm going to go to defrost and see if it gets stuck there. Okay, it's gone from there. We just check up top here. It's starting to come out of the defrost. These doors move quite slow. And then we'll try to go back to panel. Appears to still be on defrost. It is. It stays there. I don't know if I can get some of this foam. You probably can't really tell, but there's these little bits all over the dash. And that has to be what it is. So we know now. We just know what we know. This is stupid. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Because I'm sure if we go check it, it's doing the same thing. I'm just going to leave the Wilberts one in there for now. Actually, I'm just going to leave it in there permanently. I bought it. So it was a $20 education. I'm not ashamed of it, because this stuff you can't look up in service data unless you have a truck to compare it to. You have no idea. And finding a 21-year-old truck in New York State is next to impossible, and unless you get some relic like this thing dragged in from out west, you just don't know. However, I thought about this last night as I was doing something. I was like, you know, if it is the problem with the foam missing on the doors, allowing it to overextend, then I think I have a solution. It ain't gonna be pretty, but it will make this Chevrolet work. And that's the main thing. Like a rock. We'll get her functioning. Get everything lined back up here as gingerly as we can. Good thing that these Chevys just snap together. Makes my life easy. I took the actuator back off, folks. I'm going to show you, because a lot of people are going to be in the comments saying, oh, you need blend doors, everything's broke, you need an actuator, you're doing it wrong. But here's what's happening, folks. This track is a track that moves the defrost door. If my hypothesis is correct and all the foam that we see on the floor is from that defrost door, and I'll show you under the dash that it flunks back and forth. Remember the flunk? When this rotates around, so under the dash, this is how this sits. When it goes up in this direction, the gear engages, and that's for panel. When it goes down in this direction, it's defrost, and it's actuating on this track. And the little plastic arm that sits in here comes around, and it closes the defrost door. Well, what I suspect is that foam is gone, and that defrost door is closing too far, minus the foam, and allows this to slightly overextend, getting us out of our usable range. Now the airflow coming out of the dash of this truck is not great. So the customer has an option. We can tear the dash apart, you know, take the dash assembly out, take the heater box out, and replace the doors so they close correctly. I'll give them that option. Or we can put some kind of small stopper down in here, semi-permanently, temporarily, and it'll allow the system to work. Do the doors seal perfectly? Absolutely not. And I even noticed when it does work, when I go from floor to panel and stuff, the airflow just isn't great and all this foam and crap blows out of the dash. But whether he fixes it or not is up to him. This is going to get it working for now, and it may be, you know, a permanent fix. Like I say, it is an old truck, so he may not be too excited about, you know, ripping the dash out. But let's get that done. Let me think of something to stick in there. So here is my potential solution. Your classic split pin. I just drilled a hole through it, 3/32, put a split pin in it, so hopefully when the peg comes down, it's going to hit that split pin and just stop. And then if this thing ever gets fixed, we just pull the pin out and everybody's good. My only concern is it may not be out far enough inside the track. Hopefully the peg goes all the way in to the track, because if not, it was just a big fat waste of time. And I won't know until I put it back together. Shut them off. We're on defrost. Well, folks, I could have made a little video for failarmy.com because the cotter key did not work. I ended up taking it out, making the hole a little bigger and replacing it with a screw. So now we're in defrost. I'm going to flick to panel. We'll see it makes a full sweep to panel now. And then we'll make a full sweep back to defrost. There's my screw head coming up and around, and that will stop just shy of that white peg. And then back to panel. So we can see now that it functions, and it has to be just a matter of fact of overextension. So we're still resting about that 0.3 volts in the panel position. I'm going to take and run it all the way to defrost. The position sensor should go to almost 5 volts and be happy with it. Our yellow line up there, I've got it set at 5 volts, so you can see we're just about 5 volts. It was when it went over, you know, that 5.1, something just out of its threshold, that it didn't like. Let my volt average catch up. Yeah, so we're at 4.99. Probably could have benefited from moving my screw a little bit further forward, but we go back to panel, goes back down, we go halfway, it stops, you know, in the foot position, back to panel, we drop back to that 0.3 volts. So it does appear that it utilizes most of that voltage range, you know, from that 0.29 volts where we're at there to the maximum of 5. So service data said 0 to 5, and that's really unusual for potentiometers, particularly if they have a like a circuit check of any sort, because they don't go from 0 to 5 because otherwise it couldn't decipher between an open and a short. So that's typically why, you know, they kind of work like they do. But we can see it works now. It's happy. It's not getting stopped. I assume, you know, the foam on the floor and the crap that's blowing out of the dash all over up there is the foam from the blend doors, and that's what makes things go wonky. But we learned a little something. It's blowing out of the floor. Switch her back to defrost, even though we know it works. We give it the old checkaroo. There's that. And then back to panel. I just gotta warm it up. I want to make sure that the hot and cold works on this used panel we put in there. Alright, that works fantastic. I'm happy. You're happy. This guy will be happy. He's got a choice to make. And that choice would be, does he want to tear it apart and fix it properly? So the proper fix, obviously, as we have discovered through the lack of information and service data, that it's going to need the blend doors. No, they're not broke. They're fully attached because they ka-thunk, as we've discovered. And that's good. And I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, that's what's wrong with it. I doubt that he would want to put that kind of money into a truck this old with this many miles on it. I just don't foresee that happening. If he does, I'd be more than happy to, you know, pull dash out, take the HVAC unit out, fix the doors, replace the doors, or whatever we have to in there. So it has that cushion of foam on it, because apparently that's in the algorithm of this controller. It kind of stinks. A couple things that are kind of disturbing about this. There's a few things that piss me off. One, there's no class 2 data line going to this controller, so we can't talk to it, which that kind of sucks, because if we could have seen what it was seeing, or seen its logic as to why once it passes that 5 volt threshold, or 5.1 volts, wherever it gets to where it's not happy, why it just gives up and doesn't, you know, try to reverse the motor. So that kind of sucks. And why on earth did they make that threshold so wide from that 0 to 5? I don't know. I don't build them, we just fix them. And I think that's all I've got to say. Hopefully you guys learned a little something, learning that, you know, first and foremost, going through and testing it and figuring out what in the thunder is happening is the best thing to do. I mean, you could have thrown actuators at this, you know, brand new HVAC unit, you know, something, or a controller, and been wrong, and that's you know, now what? Now what do you do? Instead, we had to buy a used controller just because we didn't know. That info is not in service data, and sometimes you either have to check a known good or get a part so you can see, does this function the same exact way? When you don't know, you don't know. Anyhow, hopefully you learned that. Go down there in that comment box, rip me apart for being a hack mechanic. While you're down there, don't forget to subscribe, ring that bell in that order. Find us on our socials, Facebook to Insty. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.